We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet. We are back for another episode of the Politics Show. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm trying to start this new thing, the Postpartisan podcast, with my friend and relative Justin by marriage. And the reasoning behind that is Justin has a much different worldview than I do. He's I've always been the type of dude who worked in an office, and this guy's a very hands-on working class guy. So, we differ on a lot of things. But the other reason I like to talk to him is I want to hear what people in conservative minded circles are talking about and how they're interpreting stuff. Because like a good example being that recent story about Trans Day of Awareness on Easter. It's like there are plenty of things you can criticize Biden about, but that's stupid. There wasn't any real there because the Trans Day of Awareness has always been a thing since like 2009. It just happened to fall on Easter this year. So, religious people put up a big, stink about it. And, that doesn't mean anything, but,
Well,
Yo, we here now. Stupid.
So this morning I was going through the mainstream news about different topics, the major topics, basically the wars, Israel and Ukraine. Not our personal wars, of course, but wars that we are inherently involved in through funding. And, just watching all this media coverage around these issues. And as someone, you may or may not relate to this, but as someone who watches shows like Jimmy Dore and, The Gray Zone and Katie Halper and Useful Idiots, Glenn Greenwald, Chris Hedges, you name it. I don't see what the mainstream media is saying outside of those sources when they kind of break down those clips. So it's always interesting for me to go into the weeds and kind of see what people are talking about in the mainstream press, because this morning it really got me thinking, and run with me on this. Okay. This is a interesting little, thought process here. The way that the press evolves with their reporting, for example, on the current skirmish in the Middle East, it's like they're a year behind the indie media, right? And it got me thinking about like how music is a similar way. The underground is buzzing with a really killer band or artist before they kind of break through to the mainstream. And it's funny how news has become that way as well, where, outlets like the Gray Zone, for example, were reporting on the Russia Gate stuff way before the press had to admit that it was a complete farce. And even then they didn't, completely admit it. They still pay homage to it. But it's just interesting to see, this with the Israel thing. Now I'm going to get into this with the World Central Kitchen thing. The stuff that the mainstream press is now forced to be reporting on has been reported on roundly in indie circles for a long time, since last year, since the war started. So we're going to go obviously into the weeds on that, but just kind of an interesting thought process I had. I thought I would kick this off with is that whole kind of, that idea that the indie media is kind of like the indie in music, like the indie underground scene, where something starts popping in the underground way before the masses kind of get it. You know, it kind of bubbles up to the mainstream from the underground, and news has become that way now, you know. And so anyway, we're gonna keep on moving here.
Oh, I am so glad you are here.
And speaking of people being ahead of the curve, this is a sample that I love to play.
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
That is, of course, Kanye from Alex Jones's show a couple years ago. But anyway, was it a couple years ago already? It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Okay, well, I need to upload my slides that I haven't uploaded yet, so I'm going to do that. But while I'm doing that, I want to introduce this little segment here. I don't know if you saw recently, but suddenly a bunch of kitchen aid workers were murdered in Gaza, and there was kind of a initial outrage about this, and then, you know, the common kind of like spate of excuses comes out, like, oh, it's war, it was an accident, you know. And then as the more and more the facts kind of come out, it's like, oh, you know, like it might not have been an accident, but we didn't intentionally do that. And you know, I just want to walk through all of this. So let's start with kind of the mainstream take on this whole story. Okay. And this is from kind of like just a report from CBS that I grabbed.
Israel, as people there in Gaza mark 6 months of devastating war. ABC's Britt Clennett is live in Israel near the Gaza border with more. Britt, good morning.
Good morning. I'm at the kibbutz of Kfar Aza, one of the scenes of the devastating attack by Hamas exactly 6 months ago. Now, Israel's saying that dozens of people were killed here.
Not gonna lie, that reporter is she's kind of stacked.
18 of them were taken hostage. 5 of them still remain as outrage grows to bring them home, and talks resume in Egypt.
This morning, massive crowds of angry protesters in Tel Aviv.
So the mainstream press, it's interesting how they're framing this, because our press frames it as like, oh, look, see, the Israelis are mad at Netanyahu. And that's, you kind of notice, you kind of see how this is going now. They're going to be like, oh, it's all Netanyahu. Once we get Netanyahu out, it's fine. You know, everything's going to be great. Where this is really not necessarily just a Netanyahu thing. I mean, anyway, let's keep watching.
Voicing their frustration that it's been half a year since 250 hostages were taken captive in Gaza in a wave of horrific attacks that killed 1,200 people. About 130 of the hostages are believed to be in Gaza. The IDF saying more than 250 of its soldiers have been killed.
I don't know if you noticed this either, but notice what the source says up here. The source of this video is Israeli Defense Forces. So that right there tells you something. I don't know if you saw the reports recently. They were going to shut down Al Jazeera in Israel because they report critically on the administration. I mean, stuff is just getting out of hand with it.
Since the Gaza invasion began. The demonstrations coming as a new round of negotiations are.
I mean, those two things are connected too when I think about it, like the whole push to be like, oh, it's all Netanyahu, and the kind of banning of Al Jazeera. It's like once they get Netanyahu out and they have no critical news sources, it's kind of like, oh, see, everything's on the up and up. You know, there's no one, and they shut down TikTok.
Underway today with CIA Director Bill Burns in Egypt, a Hamas delegation arriving today. Itzik Amado's relative Gadi Moses is held in Gaza.
It's too much to wait 6 months for your hostages, for family. It's tough.
The Israeli military say that more than 30 hostages are already dead. Just yesterday.
So they also, I love the press tends to do this too. They just go, the Israeli military say, and then there's never like, but other sources say. They're just kind of like, this is what we recite because this is what
the IDF says it retrieved the body of 47-year-old Elad Katsir from southern Gaza. Ayala Metzer is a family friend of the Katsirs. Her father-in-law, Yaram Metzger, was also taken hostage from kibbutz near Oz on October 7th.
I don't know what to do. I know Elad when he was
Now, this is why I wanted to show this clip. But I mean, listen, I support these people's cause because they want the hostages back, and obviously, the best way to do that would be to negotiate and stop the killing, which they could have done. Netanyahu could have done a long time ago, but there wouldn't have been any funding behind that. Anyway, listen to what this lady ends with. This is important.
What's your message to Biden? What do you want him to do? Keep pushing, do more, please. Please, we ask you to help us.
Since the October 7th attack, an Israeli
Keep pushing, do more. That's the point where the propaganda, detector in my brain goes off. I wanted to grab a screenshot of this, and I should have, but there's this meme that I think is so great. It's like, what's that called when like government is like a text message thread between two people, and the first guy's like, what's it called when the government like tries to show you stuff to like support its agenda or whatever, and the response is like propaganda, and then the guy responds back, he's like, take a propaganda at these nuts, boy. Propaganda. I mean, that might be the theme for this episode is propaganda. That's what we'll start calling propaganda, is take a propaganda at this. Live on
The military
CBS.
campaign in Gaza to destroy Hamas's capabilities has soared to over 33,000 dead, according to the Hamas.
To destroy Hamas's capabilities? I mean, what capabilities does Hamas have, really? I guess there is some proof that, I mean, I don't know, to be honest. Like, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on this, and I'm not going to pretend like I know, because I'm sure they're able to get weapons from somewhere, or they have them stockpiled already. But I guess the idea is that Iran's giving them weapons, and that's why we need to blow Iran up. I mean, when I hear that kind of talk, I'm very skeptical, because it seems like that's the necessary, that's the move with all. It's always the move is always to push for more war in every case. And here they kind of dress it up as well, let's listen to the rest of this.
Hamas-run health ministry. Millions of Palestinians have been
listen to that. I love to
according to the Hamas-run health ministry.
According to the 30,000 dead, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. So anytime they give you kind of a statistic like that, they always preface it with like, that's what the terrorists are saying.
Millions of Palestinians have been displaced, entire
so here's where they
cities
kind of like
reduced
give
to
you a
rubble,
little bit of the other side.
and a deepening humanitarian crisis has upended the Gaza Strip, risking famine and starvation.
And Israel remains on high alert amid threats from Iran that it will retaliate for a bombing of its consulate in Syria. The US warning that a significant attack could happen at any moment.
Okay.
Overseas.
So this is how unhinged these people are. They bombed this Iranian consulate, and all with our backing. But this was mostly about the WCK workers, right? And so I want to go way into the weeds on this, because here is a video the WCK workers posted.
We're at the Jirabala kitchen, and we've got the mise en place.
This is who these
tell us a
people
little bit about it, Chef Ali.
This is the mise en place to cook the rice. So we have all the spices to boil the water. Be ready for put the boiling water inside the rice. This is the stir fry. We put oil. We stir fry onions. We have the spices, and after we stir fry the rice, we add the water. The water is aromatized with these spices, this mix of spices. There is black lemon, there is some chili, there is 7 mixed spices, bay leaf, salt, pepper, and tomato paste.
Indeed. So this is the beautiful, fragrant, aromatic rice that will be served today from Jirabala kitchen. Thank you.
So I just wanted you to see the face of terror that these people, they're clearly terrorists. So So here's what CBS has to say about this. These people being
Director
killed.
Bill Burns traveling to Egypt to revive negotiations to release the Israeli hostages in exchange for a ceasefire with Hamas. Earlier in the week, President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held an intense phone call where Biden urged the Prime Minister to conclude a deal without delay and to open
This must be from CBS Canada or something, judging by this guy's accent.
more humanitarian aid corridors to Gaza.
Did you threaten to stop military aid to Israel? I asked them to do what they're doing.
The push for a ceasefire comes as the Israeli Defense Forces shared the findings.
I asked them to do what they're doing. When I see Biden, I have to play this clip because people forget about this, and this is from a couple years ago. Just remember this when he got up and walked off of Nicole Wallace's show. That's just the way that I see Biden. Let's watch that one more time. He's like a zombie. Anyway, back to this one.
Into the strike that killed 7 aid workers from the world's.
Okay, that's key there. Investigation. Let me back that up just a little bit because I sidetracked with
Investigation into the strike that killed 7 aid.
Okay.
Ceasefire comes as the Israeli Defense Forces shared the findings of its investigation into the strike that killed 7 aid workers from the World Central Kitchen. Israel's military says it mistakenly believed that Hamas militants were inside a World Central Kitchen vehicle after misidentifying an aid worker, likely carrying a bag, as a militant with a gun. They targeted that car with a drone at 11:09 p.m. Some inside it fled to a second car, which was also hit by a drone 2 minutes later. And the same thing happened with a third. An attack in
And the same thing happened with a third. So this is the mainstream media.
Israeli military standard operating procedures.
At the time, they were certain that they were targeting Hamas. This tragic mistake could and should have been prevented.
CBS News has also learned that U.S. intelligence believes Iran is preparing a major attack in retaliation for an Israeli airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus this week.
I love that pivot too. They're like, okay, they said it was a mistake. Anyway, Iran is ready to attack.
U.S. officials tell CBS News Iran is making preparations to launch a swarm of drones and missiles timed around the upcoming end of Ramadan. Cristian Benavides, CBS News.
The smartest thing that Iran and Russia can do at this point is just sit tight and let the U.S. collapse on itself. I mean, just get out of the way while we fucking implode. I mean, look at what's going on. It's absolutely insane. And they're like, where are the cooler heads? Where to prevail? I don't see any. So I want to show you this real quick in regards to this defense minister's comments on CBS News here, because I found this to be very interesting. This is from Jewish Voice for Peace, actually, from their Instagram, and it's a news clipping, and it says Israel's style of public relations. SIR, I don't know what that means, but a quick guide to Israel's PR methods. 1, we haven't heard reports of deaths. We'll check into it. 2, the people were killed, but by a faulty Palestinian rocket or bomb. 3, okay, we killed them, but they were terrorists, which that guy just lit on. 4, okay, they were civilians, but they were being used as human shields. 5, okay, there were no fighters in the area, so it was our mistake, but we kill civilians by accident. They do it on purpose. 6, okay, we kill far more civilians than they do, but look how terrible other countries are. 7, why are you still talking about Israel? Are you some kind of anti-Semite? So I want to show you this next clip. On the whole anti-Semite trip, I have to show you this clip of Scott Ritter talking about this on Judge Napolitano's show. So just sit back and enjoy this.
To shore up this country that's on its last leg. But before we do, I have to address the recent events in the Middle East. The Israeli military intentionally targeted food workers and killed 7 of them. What is your understanding of the facts?
So can you hear the difference in the tone already? Like the CBS news video is totally the language is or like Orwellian kind of covering for it. And then they kind of splice in the first clip I showed you, they kind of splice in a little bit of the other side of the story to make it look like they're being fair. This guy right out the gate is like, intentionally killed the language. They intentionally killed these workers. But listen to what Ritter says, because he addresses a lot of the stuff the CBS
in which this happened, from which the Prime Minister of Israel says it was an accident, and the head of the food workers group, an internationally recognized Spanish-American dual citizenship chef named Jose Andres, says we were targeted.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we need to understand that even the Israelis can't get their lies in order. They've had to, because it was deliberate target. I'm just telling you as a targeteer, somebody who's done this.
So just a quick aside here. One of the reasons I trust a voice like Scott Ritter's is because he was one of the guys who got it right on Iraq. Whether you like him or not, he was correct about that. So I feel like going back to these voices, because a lot of the same people responsible, or in the circles of people responsible for the Iraq debacle, are responsible for what's going on in our government today. They're just permanent Washington, D.C. holdovers from previous administrations who are calling the shots. As we know, the president is clearly not.
In war, there was nothing accidental about it. It can't be an accident. The decision chain that's involved, the communication between intelligence, the operational planners, and the weapons systems, it doesn't allow for an accident. This isn't somebody on guard duty who's a little tired, sees a movement, fires a shot, and oops, you accidentally killed somebody. This is a moving target that wasn't targeted once, but 3 separate times, which meant that there was the goal and objective of killing everybody that was, in these vehicles involved. And so the accidental story went away, and what they say now is bad intelligence, that they believed that this organization that provides.
I always think of, if you're a metal fan at all, Megadeth, the song Holy War's Punishment Due, there's a line where he goes, military intelligence, 2 words combined that can't make sense. And whenever I hear these kinds of tales of heroism, frankly, those types of metal lyrics just pop in my brain, because that's how autistic I am.
Food to Palestinians, who, by the way, cleared their route in advance with the Israelis. They said, this is the route we're driving. The Israelis went, good. They said, these are the vehicles we'll be having. The Israelis said, good. These are how the vehicles are marked. The Israelis said, good. And this is the time frame that we're going to be going on. And the Israelis said, good. And these guys complied with everything they said they were going to do. But the Israelis now claim that they believed that these guys picked up a senior Hamas figure at.
Imagine if all you had to do to just have a license to kill whoever you want to say, oh, we thought they were with a terrorist. And then you can just blow a building up. I have to show this right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut away from this, but I made this a while ago, and it holds so true in light of all this. So watch this really quick.
Sledgehammer.
All right, what's going on? I gotta get to work.
I've got a sniper on that roof. Hammer, what are you doing? You'll get killed.
I think I got him.
A
So
warehouse
that is a clip
that they
from a 80s television show called Sledgehammer, that kind of sums up. That was originally supposed to be a comedy bit, but now it's actual military policy that we're supporting. And again, people in the comments were like, yeah, F around and find out, that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, listen, that is just stupid. If your mom was in that building, you would not support that. If your family was in that building, you would not support that. And we're supposed to be better than that. That's the whole idea. That's the whole justification for all of this, is that we're better than that. Anyway, listen to Scott Ritter.
They began their journey from, and that this was really an effort to target that Hamas figure. And there was, oops, we were wrong. They didn't. That's the mistake they're talking about. But this was no accident. This was targeted assassination of everybody in those vehicles, because they didn't know which ones were the supposed Hamas figure and who were the people who are now corrupted. They're no longer innocent because they've been facilitating the travel of Hamas. This is absurd. The 3 security personnel that were hired by this organization were all very experienced professionals whose job it is, and I don't work with their particular company, but I have a very good friend who runs a similar company that does similar security work in Gaza for organizations such as this. These guys, their number one priority is the security of the people they're on. They go overboard to ensure that there is no conflict of interest, that there is no way anybody can say you're doing something that allows you to be stripped of your veil of protection. And so it's impossible to come up with a situation that says these professionals would have allowed anybody to bring a Hamas person in, because that immediately makes you a viable target. So it didn't happen. We know it didn't happen because of the professionalism and the past track record. Plus, this organization is not an organization that has a track record, a history of, working with Hamas. They feed the Palestinian people. Everybody knows this. This was part of an overall Israeli strategy to make it impossible for aid workers to operate in Gaza.
Okay, this is all from YouTube, so I just want to say that and make that clear. This is all clips that are freely available on YouTube, so it must be okay to say this stuff now. Let's keep going.
This was deliberate murder by the Israelis. They knew there was no Hamas person. Why isn't somebody challenging them saying, give us the intelligence? How do you know that? Where'd you get that from? Nobody's going to do that. The Israelis have done their investigation, and the prime minister has taken responsibility. But I'm telling you right now, this is part and parcel of a deliberate action on the part of the Israelis to make it impossible for foreign aid workers to operate in Gaza. One of the first things that happened after this is that aid ships that were bringing aid in to Gaza turned around because it's unsafe. That is the Israeli objective. That's what happened here. This is murder by the Israelis. And here's the thing, Judge, and I hate to say this because I don't like going down this route, but this is the truth. Israel's murdered 33,000 Palestinians because they're brown. They're just numbers. We weep about the children. We weep about the women. But they're brown. They're brown. They just killed 7 white people, and now they're in trouble. I mean, and again, they should be in trouble, but I just want the audience to reflect on that. Israel's in trouble for killing 7 white people.
Not for killing 33,000 brown people. Wow.
That's right. Just
reflect on that. I mean, that's a fantastic point. This is the thing that, because frankly, they can't really hide from that. They can't just call these people Hamas or anti-Semites or whatever, because they're feeding Israel. So it's a problem.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
So in this next clip, you're going to hear from the guy who runs the WCK. And this is also from Napolitano's show, who has a great show, by the way. Subscribe to his channel.
Food outfit, the World Central Kitchen, also has been feeding Israelis as well. Here's the chef, this world-renowned chef, founder and owner, Jose Andres, and a clip that's gone viral in the past 24 hours.
What I know is that we were targeted deliberately, non-stop, until everybody was dead in this convoy. This happened over more than 1.5, 1.8 kilometers. So this was not just a bad luck situation where, oops, we dropped the bomb in the wrong place, or no, this was over 1.5, 1.8 kilometers with a very defined humanitarian convoy that had signs in the top, in the roof. That cannot be the role of an army. That cannot be the role of an army that has hundreds of drones above Gaza in any single moment. Humanitarians and civilians should never be paying the consequences of war. This is a basic principle of humanity. At the time, this looks like it's not a war against terrorism anymore. Seems this is a war against humanity itself.
It's an internationally recognized apolitical person with a profound Scott Ritter-like statement. This is a war against humanity itself. I want to play another view of this for you. This person has been a friend of mine for many years, and I've been on his show.
I'm going to stop there, but I just wanted to contrast the reporting in the mainstream with the reporting in the indie media, and how there is like at least a 3-month curve, maybe more curve, where the mainstream news is basically state run, and they don't get it right until it's too late, and then they're forced to, because it's just undeniably fact and it's out there. And if you can't see that, and that's why they want to shut down outlets like things like TikTok, and why Elon Musk is suddenly an evil demon because he bought Twitter and exposed some shit. I mean, I feel bad for you if you can't see that, because it's just right there in front of you. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about the other war that we're currently fronting, which is the Ukraine war. And let me just put this up, because this is basically the size of it right here. There's problems all over the country. It's not a red state, blue state thing. And, we talked about it on the Post-Partisan podcast. I talked to some guys the other day who are definitely more to the right than I am. They watch guys like Dan Bongino and very MAGA. But, they sound like leftists in a lot of forums, but then they still have that cult mentality on a lot of this stuff. The migrant workers thing is a big one for me. And because these people aren't the enemy. The people who are using them for cheap labor are the enemy, not the Mexican people or the migrant workers from any Latin country, or any country for that matter, coming in looking for jobs. And I don't disagree that we need to do a better job with the border, but this is about this Ukraine thing. And I'm just going to continue here with some more commentary from Scott Ritter, since we were already talking to Scott Ritter, or listening to Scott Ritter. But here's kind of his take on the current state of things in the Ukraine. Again, from Napolitano's show.
And this may be why they're in Brussels. The proposed loan. I mean, who would lend money to an entity that is more likely than not to exist a year from now? But the EU is planning on lending 100 billion euros to Ukraine. Now, I don't know if that's cash. I don't know if it's securities. I don't know if it's the equivalent in equipment. I don't know if the loan's going to come all at once. At one point, they said it will be 25 billion a year. What good can possibly come from that other than more Ukraine deaths of young people?
Well, the interesting part is that while the European Union is talking about loaning this, listen to Kuleba. What, you're going to make us pay interest? We have to pay it back? We don't want that. I mean, it's amazing, the hubris of the Ukrainians. I think what the Europeans are doing is is setting in motion a process designed to motivate the U.S. Congress to step in and say, we'll do one better. We're going to give you a loan. There'll be zero interest. You heard Lindsey Graham talk about this, zero interest. And we understand you'll never have to pay it back. And I think that's what the Europeans are doing. They're trying to kickstart the American Congress to get such a loan package in. But again, I just want to say, as an American, I take umbrage at that. What, you're going to give the Ukrainians tens of billions of dollars of interest-free loans that they don't have to pay back? But if I want to send my kid to college, I got to take out a loan that you're going to charge me 25 to 32%, and I have to pay it back. I can't declare bankruptcy and make this debt go away, thanks to Joe Biden. I think that this is a politically untenable solution. It's one that will, I would hope, generate outrage amongst the American people to the extent that it becomes politically untenable. We shouldn't be giving money to Ukraine at this point in time. We should be convincing the Ukrainians to back off. This is like saying that you want to help somebody with a drug addiction. Oh, by the way, here's 5 kilos of cocaine. Go ahead and snort away. Giving Ukraine money at this point is you're throwing money away, because Ukraine has lost this war. They're not going to win this war. There's nothing we can do to prevent that.
But
you're just sustaining the suffering.
The money that Speaker Mike Johnson, is now negotiating to give away, doesn't most of that stay here? Doesn't most of that go directly to Raytheon and Honeywell and whoever's building this?
This is the rub,
this
right
hardware.
here.
It doesn't even go to Ukraine, as I understand.
I want to stop here for just a second and give credit to Bill Maher, who actually pointed out how the defense industry is largely a jobs program. They have arms and they have operations in every state. They have their arm in every congressman and every representative. And what he just described is proof of that. But to his discredit, Bill Maher doesn't see that on this issue. He's one of those, like, we got to get Putin guys, who still thinks in Cold War terms that Russia's still communist and Putin's trying to take over Europe, because they've been brainwashed to think that.
Well, that's the argument that they're making, and that's true. The money, a lot of this money is meant not to give Ukraine weapons. Again, the idea, just think about this, people. Ukraine needs weapons. Ukraine needs this. So we're going to give them a package, but 60% of it doesn't go to Ukraine. It goes to build weapons.
Do they even know what they're voting on? Do they even know what they're doing? 40% is going to go to slaughter more Ukrainian young men, and 60% is going to go to the military-industrial complex so that they can continue to make donations to the members of Congress who voted in favor of this.
That's
okay. So I want to move on to another clip for you about this, because this is what they're saying about the Ukraine in the mainstream news. And we're gonna really chop this up a little bit. So listen to some of this.
Hamas war. Israel says it will temporarily open the Eretz border crossing near Gaza City to allow more aid to reach civilians in the Gaza Strip. It's unclear when that will happen. The decision comes after a tense phone call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister.
A tense phone call. I love that. So they start by propagandizing about that whole thing, as you could imagine. Let me bump it forward just a little bit to special guest. Well, let's just.
Good to see you.
Hello all.
So
actually, let me go back.
Developments in the Israel-Hamas war. Israel says it will temporarily.
He introduces Representative Jane Harman, who is no longer in Congress, is a California rep. Just
open
listen.
the Eretz border crossing near Gaza City to allow more aid to reach civilians in the Gaza Strip. It's unclear when that will happen. The decision comes after a tense phone call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the wake of that Israeli airstrike that killed 7 aid workers with the World Central Kitchen. Joining us now is former Democratic Congresswoman and chair of the Commission on the National Defense Strategy, Jane Harman.
Chair on the Commission for the National Defense Strategy. Okay, that's interesting. I want to start by pointing out that Michael Steele here is the former RNC chair. How many Republicans are at MSNBC? It's literally like all neocon former Bush Republicans now. Steve Schmidt, Nicole Wallace, Joe Scarborough, Michael Steele. I mean, I'm sure there's more, but those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But listen to what Jane Harmon here has to say, and then we'll go into the weeds on who she is and why she's here.
Have you, Jane?
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, Congresswoman. Good to see you.
Hello. Hello, all.
So there were parents of some of the Israeli hostages in Gaza on Morning Joe earlier this week, and they were sort of saying that they felt like they and their families were forgotten sort of by these developments, and how President Biden has pushed Netanyahu to reopen, pathways for aid.
So there it is. There it is. There's the reason they're doing the protest now, because that's how they're going to argue against doing anything for Gaza is, oh, you're hurting the feelings of the hostage people.
Aid after this World Central Kitchen situation. To me, it suggests that Biden could have called Netanyahu up at any time during this war and said, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, because of how he's now shifting.
No shit, Sherlock. This has been the case all along, lady.
What's the weather like on your planet?
Do you see it that way?
Well, not quite, but you can keep two things in mind at the same time.
Not quite.
One is...
Oh, my God. This lady. Listen,
humanitarian aid for starving people who have sadly been isolated by this very aggressive and I think not very effective Israeli strategy in Gaza. They're not achieving their objectives, in my view, although I support their objective to eliminate the Hamas governance. But there's...
Keep that in mind. They're not achieving their objectives in her view. Does that mean they need more money? Probably.
But the hostages include 6 Americans, and 30 Americans were killed on October 7th, and I don't know why that's not a bigger part of the conversation. That is really traumatizing Israeli psyche, and I think it is way past time to focus on ending that piece of this. And I gather that Bill Burns is headed to Egypt to try to negotiate that. Sure, a sticking point is how many
got to get this under control before the election.
Hostages, or how many prisoners, let's go there, how many Palestinian prisoners have to be traded. But I think they can get over that. If these people stay in captivity a little longer, it's been 6 months, more and more of them are going to die. And this will be, sadly, a real policy failure.
Okay, now we'll get to the relevant piece of this here. So take this in.
And you had some very interesting insights in the last few days, having just arrived back from Ukraine. We had Ambassador Bridget Brink, our U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, on Twitter, noting, great meeting today with a delegation from National Defense Strategy Commission led by Jane Harmon. We discussed the importance of our continued support to Ukraine in its fight for freedom against Russia's illegal and brutal aggression. Update.
That's beautiful, man.
Us on those conversations in your meetings with advisors to President Zelensky and the U.S. ambassador.
Well, we spent 2 days in Ukraine, got back late yesterday afternoon. Bridget Brink is terrific and has been there for some time, has an excellent team, and is very courageously trying to fight for what we need, which is this $60 billion in U.S. aid. Congress is coming back this week.
We need this, like, who's we, Jane?
The Senate's already acted, and kudos to Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and others for producing a huge victory in the Senate. But in the House, we'll have to see. 8 months delay is way too much. And what's happening there is, sadly, Zelensky and his people are, as he said, cutting the line. They're trying to fight the Russians across a long border with Russia, but without ammo and without what's called long-range fires, missiles to hit back at the installations that are hitting them, and without really good anti.
This is a salesperson. Like, you listen to this lady. This is a sales pitch. She's a salesperson selling a war. She works for she's part of the Aspen Institute. She works for or the she's like sits on the board of the National Defense NGO bullshit that supports every war and figures out how to sell it to people. This woman is a sales. She just wrote a book about why we need to do more war and fund war all over the place. She's a salesperson for war. But let's keep going.
Jamming equipment for the drones that they have in great numbers, they have to make decisions that, we can't be here, we can only be there. By the way, one of the things we saw, Michael, that was amazing was their own aerospace industry. They are building low-cost drones for $350 a copy. They are building long-range drones.
See, your investment really is good. Just keep dumping money into this. See what's happening? They're
for about $5,000 a copy, and they are making their own tanks.
If you act now, you'll get their own aerospace industry. The Ukraine will develop. Like, this is what this woman sounds like a salesperson.
This is an astounding thing. They've changed their technology base to focus on this, and they're showing us how to do it. But without the long-range fire and without the other U.S. aid, Patriot missiles, they still can't win.
It is a number of these missiles that the Congresswoman is talking about. I mean, they're made here in America. The money that Congress would pass is money to go to the Pentagon so they can buy from American companies in places like Kentucky and Arizona and all over America.
See, they're not even afraid to say it out loud. They're like, this is for companies in the U.S. This isn't even about Ukraine. We're fine grinding these people to a pulp as long as we create jobs making weapons here in the good old US of A. Let's keep going a little bit.
Talk about made in America first.
70% of that budget goes to U.S. companies to backstop the weapons that are needed.
Simone Sanders, also a Biden surrogate, literally worked for the Biden administration.
And I can't imagine why it is in our interest not to send this aid yesterday, given the fact that if Ukraine loses or if Ukraine is depleted, Russia's going to move on into NATO and we're going to be involved in a land war. Seems to me this is a much cheaper, more effective way to handle this.
Just give us the money or Putin's going to get you. Putin is going to get you unless you give us the money. So just real quick, this is something I pulled up on this woman, her World Economic profile. I'm going to reject additional cookies here. Jane Harman served 9 terms in Congress as the U.S. representative for California's 36th Congressional District and was ranking member of the Intelligence Committee after 9/11. Oh, that really makes me like her a lot more. She left the House in 2011 to become the first woman president and CEO of the Wilson Center, transitioning to President Emerita in 2021. Currently, she chairs the Commission on the National Defense Strategy and Board of Freedom House. She is also a trustee of the Aspen Institute, the Trilateral Commission, a presidential scholar at USC, and serves on the advisory boards of the Department of Homeland Security, NASA, and Iridium Communications, Inc. What is Iridium Communications, Inc.? Should we go down the wormhole here? I should have done this research before we started, but let's see what that is. Satellite communications. I wonder if that's a conflict of interest. Is it? You think? You think that she makes any money from this? Let me go back. Sorry, I didn't enlarge my screen either on that last view here of the World Economic Forum. Just see. So she is a presidential scholar. She serves on the advisory boards of the Department of Homeland Security, NASA, and Iridium Communications, a company that clearly sells satellites, probably used for wars. Let's go back to Harman's book, Insanity Defense, Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems Makes Us Less Safe, was published by St. Martin's Press. So she's also selling a book on why we need to be more militaristic and dump more weapons into conflicts around the world. What a fantastic person. And I'm sure MSNBC mentions absolutely none of that when they have her on speaking.
I mean, we mentioned this. I mean, it's worth reading from Senator Schumer's dear colleague letter that he did send out to senators, really kind of talking about the agenda and talking about the calendar ahead. And he notes in this letter, we continue to keep pressure on the House to act on the Senate-passed national security supplemental. And later he says, I've spoken with Speaker Johnson, and I believe that he understands the threat of further delaying the national security supplemental. Yeah. But he has to ultimately decide for himself whether or not he will do the right thing for Ukraine.
Well, Johnson's caught between a rock and a hard place in the reading. Yeah, a little bit, because the reading that I've picked up, Jane, here in Washington is that he is now in a much more inclined to want to do the right thing.
That's what I hear.
On Ukraine, but you still have the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world who are stopping that. Does there come a point where this aid, as it's currently...
This got me thinking. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene recently on Tucker Carlson, so let's see what she has to say about this. Let's hear directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
There's not a lot we can do, but one person who actually serves in the U.S. Congress and who is saying the truth about this question out loud is a member from Georgia called Marjorie
Directly
Taylor
from the
Greene.
horse's mouth.
She joins us now to explain
Marjorie
what she's
Taylor
doing
Greene's
in the
take.
face of this insanity. Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming on. Do we mischaracterize any of that?
Me.
Do you think? I mean,
no,
from
not at
an
all.
outsider's perspective, it seems like Mike Johnson is working the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, the supposed conservative.
She looks like she might have caught a little sunburn down in Mar-a-Lago.
He's working with the Biden administration to put the priorities of Ukraine above the priorities of the United States and to do something that his own voters don't want him to do. Is that true, do you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Tucker, because the details of the foreign aid package that we're going to be voting on next week when we go back to Washington, we're reading about the details in the news.
This is what the one Jane is advocating for, Jane Harman of the of Iridium Communications Inc., as the Aspen Institute and the World Economic Forum.
Let me tell you something. Not one Republican member of our conference that I have spoken to has any idea what is in this foreign aid package that's going to give $60 billion to Ukraine. And that is even the leadership offices. They haven't heard from Mike Johnson on the details. We're reading about it in the news the same way the American people are. And it's outrageous. When you saw Zelensky right there on that interview talking about, oh, we're going to lose territory. Oh, we really need this money. This $60 billion should have been approved yesterday. Let me tell you, we are losing our country.
He sounds like Jane Harman, who was actually just in Ukraine and probably going over talking points with
to the illegal invasion that's happening every single day at our southern border. And
so
this
is where the pivot is like, okay, the illegal invasion. Okay, again, the illegal invasion has nothing to do with the border or vote. Like, Republicans think that they're smuggling in Mexicans to sway the vote. Now, listen, there is proof to that theory. There's definitely some foundational data behind it. However, if they really want to steal an election, do you really think they need immigrants to vote? It's all done on computers. It's not difficult to hack these voting machines. If we really want fair elections, we need to have a paper trail and audits. But, you know, this is why the pivot to the migrant workers, it goes back to the pitting workers against each other when we're really kind of like all on the same team here. But I will say sunburned MTG here has the right take on Ukraine. I'm going to show you why.
Pissed off about it because the American people are pissed off about it. And while our so-called Republican Speaker of the House is only working with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Ukraine First Mitch McConnell and the White House and Jake Sullivan, who he talks to on the phone all the time, we are angry and people have had it. We don't want $60 billion to go to Ukraine because as we slept last night, Tucker, we just went $40 billion more into debt. And that's because the interest on our debt is so huge and our debt.
So this is where it gets a little disingenuous. And again, it's like, who fucking cares about the debt? But I want to show you one more thing before we close this out, because she is on the right path here. And I killed the sound on this again. This is such a relevant piece of data for everyone to look at, because this right here is why we can't have nice things. People are like, why can't we have nice things? This is why. Why are we doing this? This is such a scam on every level since World War II. This is why everything is crumbling around us, because all of our money is going to shit like this. And so left or right, it's the battle now is not Marjorie Taylor Greene and, the insurgent Republicans versus the establishment Republicans, or, the left versus the Democratic Party, because the left is really on board with this at this point. The real battle is people that want a better country here versus people that are cool with this continuing on the path that it's been continuing on forever, and in fact inflating even further. Because it's like, look, I'm not even against the idea of American hegemony, and I've said that before. I wasn't against it until I realized how insanely corrupt our government and system is. But the reality is, we could do a lot more through soft power and covert stuff with a surgical intensity to maintain power than we do with these money laundering scams and these just dumping billions and billions of dollars with no accountability overseas. I would be fine with some of this stuff too if they were like, okay, here's the goal that we're spending this money to achieve, and here's like benchmarks we're hitting on the way to that goal. They don't even do that. There's no accountability. That's the thing. If there was accountability for this money, it would be a whole different story. If there were, levers in place to say, hey, and as we can clearly see with the top line now here in 2011 and continuing, there is zero accountability for any of it. We never pull the strings and go, okay, wait a minute, like, we're giving you X, you need to do Y, or X is going away or going down substantially. We don't have to completely pull it, but this is our, if so again, the argument in favor of this would be, hey, if by doing this, it gives us all this power around the world. Okay, show us that power then. Show us that power, because it doesn't look like it's working. I just want to be sure people know that I'm just making pragmatic arguments here. I'm not anti-American. I'm not anti-Israeli. I'm not anti-anything, really. I'm not anti-Palestinian. I'm just for like common sense and, data-backed principles and against hypocrisy. And this is just crazy. So moving on. I mean, the one last piece I wanted to show here, actually, before we move on, I always say that, and then I realize I still have another piece. This is to cap this off. Watch this.
We'll be on Capitol Hill next week to discuss emergency aid for Baltimore as it cleans up after last month's bridge collapse. A major step is clearing debris from the water and reopening shipping canals to the Port of Baltimore. That alone will cost tens of millions of dollars. CBS News has learned Governor Moore will meet with Maryland's congressional delegation and the White House budget director about a path forward. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland has new reporting on this and joins us now.
Now, this is just one example recently of stuff that we could spend $60 billion on. Take that money. If I was a Republican in Congress right now, I'd be, hey, guess what, Ukraine? We're going to take this $60 billion that all these NGOs and Jane Harmons are advocating for sending to you guys, and we're going to drop all of it, $60 billion on this bridge, and we're going to make the best goddamn bridge you've ever seen. And it's going to be like this high-tech cyber bridge with robotic gate, whatever. Like, for $60 billion, I'm sure you can build a goddamn insane bridge, right? Poof. And even if you don't get $60 billion for the bridge, even $1 billion for the bridge would be fantastic, because listen to what they're actually advocating for.
Scott, what is the goal of Governor Moore's meetings Tuesday on Capitol Hill?
Meg, he's trying to unlock a Congress that is locked up on seemingly everything. In a different time, in a different era, this would be simple. It's simple to pass emergency funding through Congress when disaster.
So again, this is why I wanted to show you this CBS clip again. They're trying to frame this as this deadlock. I guarantee you if someone made this an issue in Congress, there would be bipartisan consensus. You just heard Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why aren't we spending this money here in America? That's her argument against the Ukraine funding.
Disaster strikes an American city or an American state, but nothing is simple now. With divided control of Congress and those very narrow margins in the U.S. House that have gridlocked them on the basic blocking and tackling of governing. So there'll be a summit of sorts. The Maryland congressional delegation, the governor of Maryland, and
So this is how they continue to paint the oppositions to the Ukraine funding as extremists. No one has ever asked Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or any of these people that I've seen about this bridge. I guarantee you, if there was a smart Democrat in Congress who wasn't completely owned by the power structure there that said, hey, we're going to work with Republicans to cut the Ukraine funding and give it to the bridge rebuild in Maryland, that you would have an instant bipartisan consensus. So this guy's being disingenuous.
The head of the Office of Management and Budget trying to figure out what to request through Congress, what could pass and what could be immediately needed. Our CBS News reporting is that the Republican in the Maryland delegation, who has a very prominent perch on the House Appropriations Committee, says something in the ballpark of $100 million or less is needed immediately to clear that channel, get the port fund.
$100 million. So I just wanted to show you this to give you an idea of the scale here. The scale of $60 billion to Ukraine, and they're like supposedly deadlocked over $100 million for a bridge here in the United States, and an insanely necessary bridge that's important to our infrastructure and shipping in and out of the port of DC. This is the scale of insanity that we're dealing with.
Functioning again, and he wants the law that is passed to specify, Meg, that anybody found liable for this, shipping company or otherwise, will reimburse Uncle Sam for the expenses.
Scott, as you said, nothing is simple now. So based on...
Imagine if they had that for weapons contractors. You know, if we don't win this war, you're going to have to pay us back. Anyway, that's the last bit of propaganda I wanted to show you in that particular piece. So moving on to additional propaganda, we are going to talk about Coleman Hughes. This has been pretty well covered for the most part, but I kind of wanted to revisit it for a simple reason, because of something he said on Joe Rogan. But let's start by just kind of showing you this clip of Sonny Hostin challenging Coleman on The View.
You are a student.
Okay, let me set this up, first of all. Coleman Hughes wrote a book about post-racial, living in a post-racial world, basically, not making skin color a big part of your identity, which I think is the path that we're definitely headed on anyway. I look at my children, like no one cares about anyone's race. It's not even a thing anymore. And I'm not saying that racism is gone. There's still definitely racism, and there is definitely systemic racism in ways that a lot of my more conservative friends don't want to grapple with or admit, but it is there, and I've seen it. I grew up seeing it. But Coleman has a very forward-thinking, thesis here, and he's been on countless shows. All my favorite shows have already covered it, but I want to focus in on who Sonny Hostin is, and just watch, how she goes at him here.
Dr. King, I'm not only a student of Dr. King, I know his daughter, Bernice, right? So I'm going to get to my...
I love that, as if that matters. Like, I know his daughter. It's like that. It's such an LA thing to name drop. Well, you might have read his books, but I know his daughter. She hasn't read any of his. I could almost guarantee she hasn't even read any of his books. This woman is. Anyway, let's keep watching.
Question.
Go ahead, go right ahead.
I think the premise is fundamentally flawed. You claim that color blindness was the goal of the civil rights movement, based upon Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, content of character versus the color of skin. Bernice, Dr. King's daughter, points out that 4 years after giving that speech, actually, Dr. King also said this: a society that has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for Negroes. He also said in 1968, it was about less than a week before he was assassinated, this country never stops to realize that they owe a people kept in slavery for 244 years. So rather than class, he did write about that earlier on. Right before his death, he made the argument for racial equality and racial reparations. And so your argument for color blindness, I think, is something that the right has co-opted. And so many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be.
She wants to be. She's not going to be, but she wants to be. Already you can just like taste the smug in the air. And I'm sure that the producers of this show probably set this up in some regard to like, because conflict drives views and they know that, but let's keep watching.
Believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you...
She called him a charlatan. Like that's a personal attack. That's really like name calling at that point.
Never voted for a Republican.
You've said that you're a conservative. No, you did. You actually said that in the podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
I love that little cough. Like that's his way of like, oh, I want to punch you so bad. That's like his like. I noticed that the first time I saw this. Is like,
yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
Okay, let's give it.
Yeah, I also love this framing because they always do this. How do you respond to the critics? I'm not saying this, but people have said.
Okay, so first thing I think it's very important. The quote that you just pointed out about doing something special for the Negro. That's from the book Why We Can't Wait that I just mentioned.
Yes.
A couple paragraphs later, he lays out exactly what that something special was, and it was the Bill of Rights for the Disadvantaged.
The last thing MLK did was the Poor People's March.
A broad class-based policy.
But he also says you must include race.
No, he didn't. He says it's
yes, he does.
Okay, well, everyone should go read the book Why We Can't Wait. Let's not get sidetracked by that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And I think it's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me with no evidence that I've been co-opted.
I want to give you the opportunity to respond to the,
I appreciate
the criticism.
I appreciate it. There's no evidence that I've been co-opted by anyone. I have an independent...
She's just a good person trying to give him an opportunity to respond to criticism.
Independent podcast. I work for CNN as an analyst. I write for the Free Press. I'm independent in all of these endeavors, and no one is paying me to say what I'm saying. I'm saying it because I feel it.
Yeah.
You can hear his voice shaking because he's so mad. He's like, but he's very composed. And I just want to show you real quick okay. Before I show you this, let's watch real quick the Joe Rogan kind of recap where he talks about this.
An experience.
Yeah, I saw you on The View.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's been overwhelming my past couple days.
Yeah, is that annoying?
No.
No?
No. I mean, it's just when I was on there, I really had no idea how it was going to land with the audience. So I just went in there, did my thing. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know who Sunny Hostin was. I actually still really don't know. So I wasn't expecting necessarily for her to kind of try to ambush me in that way and attack my character in that way. And I responded to it in the moment as I do. And I didn't expect it to go as viral as it did, but I think it arguably went more viral than anything I've ever done. It's hard for me to totally tell, but I've just got people messaging me almost nonstop for like 4 days afterwards.
Well, it is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And at the same time, it seemed like The most interesting part was their
rabies infested hen house. I mean, that's come on,
audience
Joe.
seemed to be on my side.
Yes. Yes.
And that's their audience.
Yes. Well, their audience is not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, but a lot of them are paid. They're paid to be there. So, because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire. And when a show gets really, really popular, you know, like Letterman or something like that, obviously it has its own fan base.
Right.
Those people will try to get tickets before anybody else does. And
I'd be interested to see who the audience, like they should do a survey of the View
in
audience
that case,
members.
they probably don't need to use a service anymore. They just get actual fans. But arguably, like the fans, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point. Most of those people can't leave the house. Like they're probably immobile.
Right. Because their mom's taking their kids to school, and that's yeah.
It's a very strange show, but it's fun to watch. It's just fun to watch them.
It's good entertainment.
Yeah,
undoubtedly.
Well, like I said, I wouldn't doubt that a producer kind of pushed her into that a little bit.
They're just, you know, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, that's sort of, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart but captured.
Sure,
And,
I think she came into it with an agenda.
Of course.
You know.
They do everything with an agenda.
Yeah.
You know.
She came into it seems, really wanting to paint me as someone that has been co-opted by the right wing.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much research she had done into me. She claimed to have read my book twice, which is almost certainly.
So this is where I want to show you who Sunny Hostin actually is, because I think that whole "you're a charlatan who has been co-opted by the right wing" is interesting, because listen to this. She began her television career as a commentator for Court TV and began using the stage name Sunny Hostin after host Nancy Grace was unable to pronounce Asuncion. How do you pronounce that? I can't even pronounce it as a white guy. Asuncion, something like that. Asuncion looks, you know, she's Puerto Rican and black. So, and asked if she had a nickname she could use instead. Hostin was then offered a spot on Fox News, the Fox News program, The O'Reilly Factor. So she sits here and talks about him being co-opted by the right when she worked on The O'Reilly Factor. And for Nancy Grace, she started her career on Fox News. Let's see. She appeared on the shows Is It Legal segments, regularly debating with Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly. So maybe she was the token liberal. CNN President John Klein signed her to the network in September 2007 as the legal analyst for its flagship morning show, American Morning. In 2014, Hostin began frequently appearing as a guest contributor on the ABC daytime talk show, The View. Anyway, you get the idea. She started her career working in right-wing circles. So her calling Coleman here a right-wing charlatan is interesting. But I will say this. Let's go to the comments for just a second. Conspiracy here. He says, accidentally correct that Coleman Hughes is a charlatan. Now, watching this Joe Rogan interview, when they got to the whole Israel thing, that's where he lost me for sure, because he has very, very right-wing, co-opted views on that whole scenario. Now, I may or may not disagree with the nuances on what he's saying, and he's actually been to Israel, so he may have a much more informed opinion than I do. But that was one of the issues where I was like, ooh, he definitely. I love everything he's saying about his book in relation to his book and post-racial relations, because I really think as a country that's how we need to look at it, because a class-based issue is really how we should look at it. I mean, there are plenty of rich black people. Barack Obama was the president. LeBron James. I mean, there are Will Smith, just to name a couple. And I'm not saying that if you look at the Forbes 500 list, there are many more Jewish, people on the Forbes 500 richest people list than there are black people too. So you can say what you want. However, I do think, in our current state of things, as we move this direction, the view that this guy has is a good one. and it's kind of the future and how things are going to look. And just to close this segment out, I want to show this tweet I shared the other day real quick, because it kind of sums up the whole. Hey, what if The View was a panel consisting of a scientist, a fast food worker, a construction worker, and a doctor, instead of a rich lady, a rich lady, a rich lady, and a rich lady? Brilliant idea, official Tomoko. And full disclosure, I stole that from Facebook and reposted it on Twitter, but I just thought it was a very relevant take on what The View is offering up these days. So we're going to move on to our next segment, which is somewhat related. And I don't, in the same vein as Coleman Hughes, there's a woman named Sage Steele who was recently on Tucker Carlson. So I want to start just by showing you who she is, because I had never even really heard of her or didn't really know that much about her. But she is someone who has been canceled, and let's start right here with. Well, let me actually do this. I'm a little fuddied here. Sage Steele is a former ESP commentator. So just so you know who she is an American television anchor, former host of Sports Center. She also hosted Sports Center on the road from various sporting events, such as the Super Bowl, the Masters, NBA Countdown, ESPN for 4 seasons, ending in 2017. For 5 years prior to the NBA assignment, Steele was a full-time host of Sports Center, ESPN's flagship show, and had previously contributed to ESPN First Take, Mike and Mike in the Morning, and Sports Nation. Steele hosted Sports Center's daytime coverage of the NBA Finals in 2012 and 2013. So if you're not a big sports person like I am not, you probably don't know much about this woman. But she was in the news recently due to the COVID thing. And, just to kind of give you the background on that, Sage Steele leaving ESPN after settling lawsuit. The host sued ESPN last year, claiming it had violated her free speech rights over comments she made regarding the COVID-19 vaccine and former President Obama. So I'm just going to show you this clip of her real quick on Tucker Carlson, and we'll talk about it a little bit.
At ESPN as an anchor, as a host for almost 17 years, and she was good at her job. That's why she stayed so long. But there was one problem. Sage Steele decided to say what she really thinks in a pretty gentle, measured way, but still, for example, in 2021, she went on a podcast and hammered ESPN for its vaccine mandate, called it sick and scary, which it was. On that same podcast, she committed a real sin, and she asked an obvious question. Why does Barack Obama call himself black when he's actually biracial? He's as white as he is black. Well, you can't say that, it turns out. ESPN pulled her off the air for 10 days. Why? Interesting question. Then Steele made ESPN even madder when she said that the man in the bathing suit, Leah Thomas, who was winning all the swimming competitions, was not, in fact, a female swimmer. So behind the scenes.
So that's part of the problem with Sage Steele, too. She came out and said, she was against biological men competing in women's sports.
ESPN said you'd better be quiet about the trans issues. In fact, sent her a letter saying it's totally fine to talk about trans issues as long as you don't misgender someone. In other words, you can disagree as long as you don't disagree with the people you're arguing with. You have to accept the terms of the trans activists you're criticizing, or else you're a thought criminal. Watch this.
There was a special, an ESPN special that came out showcasing, Women's History Month. And the special was surrounding Leah Thomas. And I just remember thinking to myself, I could not imagine being a woman working there, being asked to report on this issue with a smile on my face and doing it. And so I just kind of wanted to ask about the support you felt from women since, of course, taking the stance that you have.
None. None. I was asked to stop tweeting about it. I was asked to stop saying anything about it on social media because I was offending others at the company.
None, absolutely none. But
Tucker Carlson just has like a really funny persona. His whole like giddy little kitty thing.
she does have good people around her because she herself is a good person. She's gone from ESPN. She settled a lawsuit with them, and now Sage Steele joins us in the studio. Sage Steele, it is such an honor to have you here. Thank you.
This is my honor. Thank you.
What a great response.
So when she said, "This is my honor," he goes, "What a great response!" And I thought that's what he was referring to, but I think he's referring to the "No women helped me."
You've received from women. None, absolutely none. Is that true?
Women supporting women. You know how it goes.
I do know how it goes.
I know, and I will say throughout my career, I think that's the overall most disappointing thing is that, and especially in the sports world, where when I started, like dinosaur years, no internet, I was always the only woman in the locker rooms.
I bet.
The most support I received was definitely from my male peers.
Yeah, because they like women.
Well, no, it wasn't like that. And I was married.
No, I don't mean in a creepy way. It's just that they're just. No, I don't mean that. Actually, I didn't mean it in a sexual way. It's just like men are.
So this got me thinking, this whole thing, because they like women. First of all, she's a very attractive woman. She's 51. She looks great, obviously. But I think I was thinking about this the other day where it's like everyone has a mother. Whether you're a man or a woman or whatever, like everyone has a mother. Like all of us gestated inside a mother for 9 months. So I think that, I mean, I know women can be catty towards one another, but I just think that like everyone loves women to some degree because everyone has a mother. Everyone was born from a woman. And, maybe science will change that in the future, but biologically, that's how it's always worked up until we got to these crazy times. And I'm not spreading hate or anything. I have plenty of friends who are of all different persuasions and I support it. But, I also support common sense and all that good stuff. So, you know the deal.
Are kind of programmed to have affection for women. I mean, they just are.
But I also think they weren't threatened by me, especially early on in my career. But even at ESPN, I was excited because where I was before in DC, I was the only mother. So I was excited to be around women who were a little bit older and could maybe, part of the club and take care of each other as a mother, first and foremost. Forget about, the broadcast, because that is competitive.
So she was canceled for having the wrong views on all the major political arguments of our time. COVID, the trans issue, Obama, you name it. And I recently saw this clip that really got my attention of Sopranos star Drea Di Matteo. And if you're a Sopranos fan, she's Christopher's girlfriend. Her name, Adriana, in the show. Her name in the show was escaping me. But watch this clip of her from Dr. Drew, because she actually just based like I never in a million years, very intelligent woman, and I was very impressed by this. So check this out. A lot of people missed it.
Take the vaccine.
I lost everything because I held out. I consumed information as much as I could about what was going on. It didn't sit right with me. I felt like the whole thing was just all very suspect. I was
your
scared.
Hollywood jobs and your
But this is
TV
interesting.
Well, in the lockdown, though, I really was like, hold on.
Something's
how
wrong.
are they managing to close down the entire world?
Right.
Wow. That is so attractive. Like, even aside from like she's a very attractive person, but like just the mental acuity and the skepticism, because so many people are so stupid on this issue, it's attractive.
That it's just all at the very top, and it was all.
I also definitely have a thing for like the New York accent, that like East Coast, like tough chick thing. So sue me.
Weaponized, and none of it even was about medical integrity. I don't think anything was about any kind of integrity. There was an agenda. It's insane. I've never been political. I've never.
Yeah, I really
I
haven't
didn't
either.
even like actors who would talk about politics. I mean, the only person I would ever put up with their politics, some musicians, but would be like Neil Young, who I adored for years. He was my favorite. I framed pictures of him all over my house. I have to sell them.
And now,
So fucking based. So based. I love that so much. I have to sell them. I had framed pictures of him all over my house. I have to sell them. Oh my God. Fuck Neil Young. Seriously. That to me, the whole thing about this, and I talked about it when it happened. You can go back and look at my old videos. I started on Rumble. I forget this. When I started doing this show, it's good to me that, you know, I have more of a viewing base on Rumble now because I started doing the show on Rumble. And then I branched out into YouTube a little bit, and then the censorship stuff started happening. YouTube has honestly been a lot better lately, as you can tell. They're actually playing views that might not jive with the mainstream narrative, which didn't happen for a long time, but it seems like they're getting a little bit less restrictive, knock on wood. But anyway, that aside, I went down this whole path about, you know, what she was talking, what we were talking about, and then I lost my train of thought. So the point is, this woman is based, and the Neil Young thing, my bad. I had to jog my own memory there. So with Neil Young, at the time that I did that segment, it seemed like a commercial for Amazon Music. It literally was like, he's like, I'm going to pull all my stuff off Spotify because Joe Rogan's spreading disinformation. And then he's like, by the way, it's on Amazon Music. Everyone go buy Amazon Music. It was so disingenuous. And so this take, I have to sell all my pictures of Neil Young, is absolutely one of the best I've heard on the situation. Congrats, Dre DiMatteo, for being just a superstar.
I can't believe what he did
with Joe Rogan.
I couldn't. That
was
blew
weird.
My
blew my
mind
It's
away.
so weird.
And it wasn't just that. It was also right. It was during the convoy, the truckers' convoy, which is like the working man
in Canada,
and the Trudeau, and he's a Canadian.
Again, absolutely based. I lost a lot of my left friends during that truckers' convoy. Just for saying, hey, like, they should be able to protest. They're not Nazis. That, you know, but again, Dre is nailing it.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're a Canadian.
I didn't know he's Canadian.
You're not going to stand up for these people right now. You're going to condemn them. Oh,
are you in anything right now?
No, I'm done. When that happened, I knew.
So she's not even acting anymore. So that's a call to producers who are based and people who aren't members of a political cult. Hire her.
Very quickly that there was no way I was going to work. You know, everybody was handing out vaccine cards and go do this. You can pay thousands of dollars.
Oh, that's interesting. Card, a lot of them had
all
fake
of that.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
My daughter, it got to the point where I started to get really nervous. I took a forbearance. I shouldn't have done
that
it.
Comment right there about the fake vaccine cards just shows you how fake the virtue signaling in Hollywood was over the whole thing.
They screwed me over in the forbearance. There's a lot of politics in it, and it was all lies. It was all built on lies. So when I had to go back and pay that money, I didn't have the right amount of money, because I also found out that I was stuck with like 3 different insurance policies that were astronomically expensive. So there was no way to get through it. And my mom was now dying. The nanny who I call my mom, she was dying, and I couldn't bring her into a hospital because her doctor wanted to vaccinate her. He became the spokesperson for J&J.
Oh my goodness.
And he's
Does he
all
have any
over the
regrets
news.
about that now? Is he concerned about it?
I never returned a fucking call because he did not.
Did you hear that? The doctor became a spokesperson for Johnson & Johnson and was on the news.
Deal with her as she was dying, and he could have come to that house and dealt with her because she couldn't go into a hospital. They would have separated her from me. And
or you could have sent a nurse at least. You can send
I
people,
took care of her myself. I became Dr. Dre.
Oh boy.
I became Dr. Dre, and we took care of her until it was time, and she died in my arms. And that's the way I wanted it.
Everyone needs to be aware about the World Health Organization treaty and push back on that.
That's
Louisiana
why,
just
that's why I
push
started
back.
Ultra Free. That's the only thing I care about.
Is the World Health?
I only care about that treaty. I have been on top of that treaty for so long. I'm like, you want to fight about abortion right now? You're not even going to have the chance to decide anything.
Wow. What a shock to me. I didn't know this woman was such an intelligent, free thinking person. So that was just bass soprano star Drea Di Matteo on everything, on Neil Young, on the World Health Organization treaty. Holy crap. As we just talked about with Jane Harmon being a member of the WEF and all this stuff, I thought this was Alex Jones level conspiracy shit back in the day, and it's all real. It's all a real thing. All the ranting about the globalists and all that kind of stuff. It's none of it's.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. We love to have your insightful commentary. And just to kind of cap this off, I just want to show you this. This is just a slide I had from back in the day. And the tweet is from a guy, Justin Hart. But he says, just an inquiry, COVID-19 deaths with a record hospitalization just fell off a cliff in March 2022 and never came back. I wonder what happened. And then here he has this chart with the end of reimbursement submission, and it ends in March 2022. And then you just see the death rate for COVID plummet down to these smaller numbers on the graph. So, very few people saw that, but apparently Drea Di Matteo has a larger brain, or achieved a level of intelligence beyond most of her peers. So, and with that, we are going to close out with one final thought. I opened this talking about the skirmish in the Middle East and how now that white people have been, drone striked, suddenly people are waking up to the reality that we have kind of like a whole unhinged situation going on there. And on the presidential campaign trail, we kind of have a basically unified viewpoint on this conflict across both parties, Democrat, Republican. Even, it took a while for the Bernie Sanders left to come around, and even they're tepid at best. But believe it or not, Donald Trump actually has the most sensible view on the Israel conflict. And listen to this.
You heard that right. In a recent interview with two Israeli journalists, Trump said October 7th was one of the saddest things he's ever seen, but took a departure from many of his fellow Republicans. Public support for Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, saying Israel should end the fighting.
You have to finish up your war. You have to finish it up. You got to get it done. And I'm sure you'll do that. And we got to get to peace. You can't have this going on. And I will say, Israel has to be very careful, because you're losing a lot of the world. You're losing a lot of support.
Okay, pause right there. That right there is just common sense. Just common sense. There's nothing controversial about what he just said at all. That is common sense. And the response to just common sense like that is how low the fucking bar is these days. Hey, you guys kind of look bad now. You should probably wind this down. That's all he's saying. And listen, listen to this.
The two Israeli journalists said what they heard from Trump shocked them. So this was a very interesting write-up.
Shocked them. How dare he point out that we are tarnishing our own image on the world stage? How dare he? Clutching my pearls. This is insane.
In the New York Times that I flagged yesterday, with the Israeli people that Trump has met with actually being very concerned that, you can read that almost two ways. When he's saying, finish the job, finish the war in Gaza, one can go to it. Does that mean, a greater military effort, more militarism? But they're concerned that what he means is not that. What he means is that Israel is starting to embarrass itself on the international stage, lose a lot of its support. Trump knows this could be bad for U.S. security. And I mean, he's kind of leaving it ambiguous enough that you can read what he's saying in multiple ways, which is a criticism we've made. But the people who know very much about Israel from the pro-Israeli side are not liking what they're hearing.
Right,
Okay, again, stop it right there. The people from the very pro-Israeli side are not liking what they're hearing. That right there is the kind of thing I would like to hear about any politician. And it's just, again, I never wanted to support Trump. I never wanted to say like, oh, like Trump's probably the best option. They made this a reality. He's saying just very common sense. Like that is a very common sense thing. There's nothing controversial about that. And anyone who can see what's going on right now can see that. And just saying something that common sense, like, hey, you guys are like really tarnishing your own image on the world stage by doing these things. They just killed a bunch of aid workers. Before that, they bombed, like, it's a war crime to bomb a consulate or a embassy. They did that, and it's just like, at what point do we lose the moral high ground? We can't ever say like, oh, well, Putin's such a bad guy when we sanction that kind of behavior on the world stage. It's self-defeating. That's the thing. And this is the craziest part about all this, because you'll be called anti-American for pointing this kind of stuff out, but it really is anti-American to let it continue, because it's hurting us in the long term. And none of these people think in those terms. It's all the Jane Harmons. The anti-Trump people are the Jane Harmons who want this grift to continue desperately. And I don't even think that, I'm not even dumb enough to think that Trump would end this grift completely, but even just having like a little bit of sensibility about it is obviously a non-starter for these people. And it goes back to this every time. All you have to do is look at that chart, and it's like, okay, that kind of money can buy a lot of influence, a lot, from a lot of people, from news organizations to fake testimonies in the ICC or whatever. Like, think like whatever you want. That level of cash can buy anything, as we've seen with the way our media works. But I just keep going back to this, when Trump is the kind of person who might be even a tiny bit of a threat to this thing here, this spiraling out of control, just money pit. And for that reason, he's a threat to democracy, and again, I don't think that he's going to end this either. But even just like I was saying earlier with the Ukraine thing, it's like, imagine someone in Congress or someone like Trump even saying, hey, you want 60 billion for Ukraine? Why don't we take that 60 billion and put it into a new bridge in DC? And like, while we're at it, you spend 40 on the bridge and 20 on like fixing the homeless problem. And then that becomes a model for doing it every time one of these funding bills comes up for a new war. It's like, oh, we need another 40 billion for this country. Well, why don't we just put that into Flint, Michigan, or New Orleans, or downtown Los Angeles, or downtown Portland, or downtown Austin, or any of these cities that are, you drive through and you can just see the damage firsthand. And that is a right-wing extremist argument to make in these times, as you can see, because MSNBC is entirely staffed by people like Jane Harmon. So anyway, as always, I like to end on something funny. And so we're going to take you out with one of my favorite TikTok clips of recent years. It's just picking up errors in the cable news landscape, and it's pretty hilarious. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Also, check out the Postpartisan podcast. We were supposed to do it today. My boy canceled on me, but I can't really fault him for that because he has to work and I do not. So we're going to leave you with this funny clip of Trump. And again, thank you for tuning in. Check out Postpartisan Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at @RoGrimes. Stay safe out there. All that good stuff. Here we go with the final clip of the night. Your moment of Zen. I can't really use moment of Zen, but anyway, enjoy this shit.
President Trump incited an erection.
His various cases of You know, he's got charges of inciting an erection.
Donald John Trump incited the erection.
They didn't like Donald Trump. They said he participated in an erection.
I always call it massive. Sometimes they say huge. Really